reader friends.
Hello, reader friends.
I got so into the countdown music.
Yeah, we were like jamming out. Oh, hi.
Hello. How's it going?
Welcome to our book club report for A Mind Spread Out on the Ground by Alicia Elliot.
Yes.
Take a look at that beauty.
Bam.
Boom shakalaka. With tabs.
Yes.
Megan has way more quotes than me.
I have a lot of notes on my phone.
Yeah.
But this was, I feel like, the perfect aesthetic to go into out of November and into December. It was perfect.
We had a lot of fun with that aesthetic.
Yes, I don't know if you guys follow us on Instagram yet. It's at Yang Gang Book Club, but we had a lot of fun with this aesthetic for the book club. It was fun. It made it fun to actually do things.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello. So if you're here, say hi in chat. We would love to hear from you. And we also would love to hear if you read the book this month. Yes. Some of you are awesome and reading the book every month. Some of you are not reading in the book every month, but still show up, and that's also awesome. Yes. We like to say, if you haven't read the book, still come hang out, man. Get the knowledge without reading the book.
Yeah. We know reading isn't for everyone. We're not under any illusions that everybody loves to read.
Yes, and we need to tweet about this more. We always like to check in, have you done the audiobook? Because audiobooks are books.
Yes, audiobooks also make reading a lot easier. I went on another YouTube channel not long ago, and they were like, "Oh yeah, I don't really read." I was like, audiobooks, it'll change your life. And if you have trouble sitting and just reading something, having the audiobook to kind of guide you as you're reading the physical copy is also super helpful.
Yes, definitely. And sometimes the narrators just take it to the next level, man. Yeah. Which I don't ever read the audiobooks for our books because I do really need to be able to make notes. So I'm always curious if someone's read the audiobook because I want to know, if it was a really good narrator and I love the book, which, by the way, I love this book.
Love the book.
I will totally reread it with the audio the next time. Makes it slightly different.
Yes.
So, yeah. Cool. So happy Thanksgiving weekend for those of you that are celebrating. Maybe you're with family or just on your own. Like we sort of kind of are. Megan and I do live with people, but other than that, and pets.
Yes, as you can hear. Tap, tap.
No. Yeah. Every time, Kateri. I don't have a pet, but thank you for being here. On this special weekend, I guess. So yeah, we're gonna jump in. This was our November book, and we have announced our December book, which we'll talk about at the end, like always. And again, say hi. Let us know if you read it, if you are thinking about picking it up, or maybe we will convince you to pick it up. And before we get into it, not that I want you to leave, but we did interview the author, if you're not aware. So I don't want you to leave, but it's probably going to end up being a better conversation. I'm just kidding.
It was really cool to talk to her. It was a really good conversation. Honestly, we went for 2 hours, and
I think it is our longest.
I don't know. Maybe the hour This Is an Uprising might have gone longer than that because we wanted to go into so much detail. But I think it's our longest interview.
Yeah.
For sure. For sure our longest interview because she had fun. We had fun. We were really vibing.
Yeah. It turns out that she's follows one of my favorite booktubers and one of my favorite beauty vloggers. Not that I follow too many, so I'm the chances that we are both into some of the same content creators. I'm she's a homegirl. So anyway, it was a really great thing, and we talked about stuff beyond the book. Just today, we're going to get into the good discussion of the book. That's a good conversation where we get to go more into, she tells you things that, you know, about the process of writing it and things that happened after. So plug that really fast. Okay. Are you ready, Megan?
I'm ready.
I know we already said we loved it, but we're going to talk about our overall thoughts of what we liked about this book. So do you want to go first?
Sure. I was just going to say, from like a reader side of things, it's a very enjoyable book to read. I enjoy that it's not like she's just talking about her life. She is putting like actual factual information in there, like about dark matter or photography, stuff that's like, oh, you're like breaking up, you know, the parts of herself. But then also I will say, from like a writer's standpoint, she's just super talented. There's something about reading somebody who is obviously very good at what they do that makes it more enjoyable from like as someone who does write, not at her level, but as someone who does enjoy writing and who does have an English degree. It was really nice to enjoy it from like that side of things as well.
Yeah. And I realize we probably should give like a really brief summary for those of you who haven't read it, because we do say that. So essentially, it's an essay collection. So there's a couple like of the reviews that call it a memoir, but the author herself does specifically say that she wants it, you to think of it as an essay collection. There are really heavy memoir elements, but kind of what she talked about in that interview we did with her, where she was like, the whole like, this is my life from like beginning to end kind of thing, is kind of it's the norm with memoir. It's what's done a lot. That wasn't what she was trying to do. And getting to what you were just saying, you know, each essay goes into a certain aspect of her life, you know, and how that relates to the world at large. And she is, and I totally did not know how to pronounce this until she came on our channel, so I'm going to try my best, but it's pronounced Haudenosaunee woman, I think, right? I'm like ballpark, at least.
It's ballpark.
Yeah. I'm Pueblo Indian, for anyone who doesn't know. That's way easier to say. We all know how to say the word Pueblo.
Yes.
I have it easy. So yeah, but this is she's Canadian, so if you're not aware, that's like 7 nations. So that's, you know, so it was really interesting too to like read a perspective. Like Megan and I are American. I think a lot of you, and like, because we're the Yang Gang book club, you know, a lot of people are American. Not that the Yang Gang doesn't have non-Americans, but it was definitely very interesting to get some history. It's like, it is our history. We're all on the same freaking continent.
Yeah.
But when we think of it as not our history, because there's a border involved.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, and I agree. Like I really like, it's like the structure. It's the way that it's like her storytelling approach is both, like I was saying, memoir, and so these really personal like snapshots that you know are true, which is the thing about memoirs. You know, Megan, right? You love memoir.
Love memoir.
And like I can relate, because I haven't read as much memoir as you, I know, but that I always like about memoir is like, and that's what's hard about writing it, is like these writers do such a beautiful job of turning something that's real into like a beautiful story. And so she does that, but then she's also like, you know, one of my favorite essays was 34 grams per dose, which is, I think, definitely one of the essays we should go into at some point, because it talks about hunger and like food poverty. So she talks about her personal experience with food poverty, but she also talks about, she pulls in facts, you know, and she kind of gives you some education on the topic as well, which I really enjoyed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just saying, yeah, she does a really, really good job with that. I think that was my
Mm-hmm.
favorite thing about it. There's something about the essay format. I feel like you can kind of go into more depth because you aren't trying to tell, I guess, like you're not trying to tell like a chronological thing. And so it's almost like I can go into a lot of detail because I'm only telling you about this one moment in time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like, I don't know, I really liked it. It was really, a really good read. And I know I say that about like a lot of our books, but this one is really good. And it was nice because, like you said, I love a memoir. And I thought this take on it was really refreshing. And it was like coming home because I love them. I love a good memoir.
Right. And we haven't read that since we've only read one other memoir, which was Made.
Yeah.
Which was our first book, for any of you who don't know. So that was back in March. So this was a special treat for Meghin.
Yes, I love a good memoir. And kind of adding on to what you were saying earlier, I can't remember which essay this was, but she goes into how it's hard for women to write fiction because good fiction, you don't know like what's real. Like it's like it sounds so good that you can't tell it's fiction, essentially. Like it's going so into depth, but then women get caught up in this, like, oh, if you're a woman writing a fictionalized story about a woman, then it's got some of you in there. So some of these thoughts that this character is thinking obviously are your thoughts because you are also a woman. And I thought that was super interesting for her to talk about, because I've always thought a good memoir kind of sounds like fiction because it's so interesting and well written that you forget you're reading about someone's real life. And so it was kind of interesting to hear good fiction seems like a memoir. Almost like.
Yeah. I think it's just like that was I remember that. I think it's later in the book, but I'm not positive.
It's like towards the end. Yeah.
And as the essay collection goes on, it turns more into an essay collection. Like some of the later essays are less about her life and more about her, almost like if you were reading a New York Times article or something.
True Lie. That's the essay, which I think was one of my favorites. I loved
that whole thing around women and storytelling that like did kind of trip me up. I kind of forgot about that, but yeah, as I was reading it, I was like, I've never even thought of it this way. But I think it also kind of gets at, like, I haven't read Wild by Cheryl Strayed, but then there's also maybe goes into that a little bit more as like Even Eat, Pray, Love. Neither of which I've read, actually. Not that I wouldn't, but I just haven't. And so I think she's kind of talking about like just some of the double standard of like women talking about or writing about their lives. And like it's just kind of looked down upon to like talk about your domestic life, especially as like being something that's like worthy of being memoir. I think, like, you know, like if it's like, well, why don't you just write fiction about it? So yeah, I did think that was interesting. So again, I just wanted to say, like, if anyone has read the book or you just got started, even check in and like let us know what you think about it. Leave a comment, any thoughts, because we definitely want to hear from any of you that have read it at any amount. Like, it's an essay collection, so you can have read one chapter, and it's like its own thing.
Yeah, that's also the good thing about the essay format is you could read just one of them and get a lot out of it. Whereas like with the memoir, like you're only reading like, oh, this is them as like a 5-year-old, and now I have to see what happened. Like how did this get resolved?
Yeah.
And I have to keep reading the book. Whereas this, it's like you could only read one. It's such a good book. Like,
yeah,
I wish I could just describe in words out loud. Like how, like, I don't know, it's one of those books that you read and you're like, I'm going to read this again. Like,
yeah, definitely. I mean, it was just, I guess I could speak to a little bit, like being someone kind of somewhat similar background. So I am part Native American. And we definitely have there's some similarities and then there's some big differences. I did not like grow up on my reservation at all. And she did. And so that was a perspective I really appreciated because on a personal level, it's something that I would just like to hear more from people who grew up on reservations, because that's just something that I didn't really get a deep understanding of, even though my family have. But then aside from the like personal part, there's just, these stories are not covered, like these, and we can get into like the nitty gritty of it, or the dark side of it, which is, the rate at which Native women are murdered. And it's still happening today. I mean, she's specifically going into things that happened in Canada, but the rate of Native women getting murdered and their murderers getting off scot-free. And also, she goes into some of the way that the community, the non-Indigenous community, rallies around these people. And the ones she mentions, at least, these are men who have murdered women, Native women. That was something that I wouldn't say I didn't know about it, but it wasn't something that I've necessarily like looked into in any sort of level. So, so she goes into that. That was really disheartening, but that's what we do. We're trying to learn more. So it was, and then she also talks about coming from two different worlds, being that she has a white mother who's like the daughter of immigrants, I think, from I forget where. I think I want to say like Poland or something, in Europe. Yeah, European immigrants.
Yeah,
and then her dad,
super Catholic.
Super Catholic. We know that. Her dad is Native, Haudenosaunee, and so I'm the opposite. My mom is Native American, but coming from two different worlds, like coming from two different cultures, which is, generally speaking, I think a lot of people can relate to. It doesn't matter, what different cultures you come from. But she goes into, actually, in a couple different ways, this interestingly paints different people as the colonizer and the colonized. And that might sound really divisive, but like there's a really small little essay where she talks about how she married a man who's white, and she writes this little love story about, the colonized falling in love with the colonizer. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting to me how she she paints, these divisions and stuff in a way that is, I think really pertinent and relevant to like modern times. Yeah. She's not like living in the past. She's like really like coming to terms with both the really dark things like murder and genocide, of Native people, but then also talking about the way that, we are like one, like the way we are, we both live on this planet now, and we are people living together. And so anyway, I really like that, and she has a child who is also like her, who is white. And also, being like a white Indian, like no one ever asked me if I'm Indian, and so it's like, it's interesting to hear her talk about that. So I personally really appreciated that perspective from this book.
Yeah.
So yes, I didn't get to see this quote. Here in BC, there's a road referred to as the Highway of Tears in reference to unsolved murdered Indigenous women. Very sad, but I also like it. I like that there are symbols that are like in communities that, we're not, it's kind of like getting at the conversation around, with the Black Lives Matter movement, most recently this summer, seeing statues and effigies of Confederate, generals being taken down. What do we replace those things with? First of all, like I heard a lot of people talking about, replacing them with Black and Indigenous people heroes,
Yeah.
And so this is not talking about a specific person, but well, we can get into different quotes that talk about like where she talks about having to reconcile with our dark past.
Yeah.
So I feel like, if you ever have a general thought you want to throw in, go for it. We're going to share some quotes now. So while Meghin gets that ready, I'll just remind everyone here, if you are not able to get your hands on the book, totally just make sure you're following our social, because we're now really trying to be really good about sharing quotes from the book that are non-spoiler. And these are a big, like the meat and potatoes of what we're going to discuss at our meetings. So if you're not able to make the time to read the book, if you're not able to get your hands on the book for any reason, totally still just follow our social and show up, and you totally can still participate. So that's the goal. We're going to do this fancy thing with our, oh yeah, look at that thing of beauty. Good job, Meghin.
Thanks.
She did all this, so I am very impressed.
I can't see myself while I'm sharing this screen, so.
Oh, okay. I'll tell you if you've got something coming out of your nose.
Oh, thanks.
You're like,
I probably should start from the beginning.
Okay.
I feel like that's one of the very last quote.
Okay. Yes, this is maybe this is like one of my top 3 favorite quotes, and this is something that if you want to hear more about this from the author herself, Alicia did talk about this. She brought this up in our interview with her, and I had like just not quite gotten to this spot. Like right after that interview, I read this part in the book. So now I've read it and I can talk about it. But you really just need to read this quote to get the basic idea. So I will do my best. Haudenosaunee have always believed in the principle of the 7 generations. When you make a decision, you must consciously think about what the effects that decision could have on your descendants 7 generations in the future. This world does not belong to you. You are merely borrowing it from coming faces. I was like, let that sink in.
Yeah. We kind of go into this with her. Actually, we go into this a lot with her. But this one always immediately makes me think of climate change and just the impact that we have on the planet. And I feel like the reason I feel like this especially goes hand in hand with climate change is I feel like a lot of the time, we're using all these resources and we're doing all these unsustainable things. And when I say we, like a lot of the burden doesn't necessarily fall on like everyday people. A lot of the burden falls on like corporations. But with that in mind, they're only thinking about their bottom line for today, tomorrow, this month, this week, this year. You know what I mean? And they're not thinking, 10 years from now, we might not even be a thing because I won't have access to this resource anymore because we've already used it up. You know what I mean? And that's what it makes me think about, because it's like we're not thinking about future generations and what they're inheriting, like what earth that they're inheriting. Like forget about society, forget about all of that. If there's no sustainable planet to live on, like what does the rest of that even matter? And it's like we're not even giving them that. So that's what it makes me think of the most.
Yeah, I think this did the same thing for me. Like I thought of when we read The Future Earth by Eric Holthaus, and how he was, what I love like literally like the number one thing I loved about that book was how much she talks about how climate change is mostly affecting, you know, small populations of Native people, you know, especially around the world, but especially like around the equator and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And how much Native people all over the world are gonna have to be a really big part of this transformation. You know, like the politicians, corporations, they like to talk about, you know, just emissions, like emissions, sustainability, recycling, like all of these things. But this is, you know, really get, and this would be, I think, a great quote for him to use in a future book. But I think for all of us to think about is like, we're going to have to like at the roots, like pretty radically rethink about how we have, how our culture functions and like the paradigm on which that we make our decisions. So yes, I absolutely agree. And I really like the way she words this at the end. It says, "This world does not belong to you. You are merely borrowing it from coming faces." And I think that like the first part, "this world does not belong to you," that really gets at like a deep thing about colonization, which is the idea that you can own the land. And this is actually an interesting thing that's also being talked about in our next book, quick plug, I saw it because I've already started it. So it's something that's just really on my mind, is the idea that like man thinks that we kind of own this land, a certain amounts of land. And so that right there, that one bit is like, that's got really deep meaning. You could write a whole essay on that part alone. And then the like kind of poetic way that she says the second part, "you are merely borrowing it from coming faces." So there's like this like sense of like having, but it's not complete. You know, it's incomplete, and it's always incomplete. There's like this I just see it as this kind of like spiral that keeps going and going and going, you know, like never ends. So long as we don't die out.
Right.
Details. So maybe pay attention to this so we don't die out.
Yeah, please, please. And then taking it further, like I like how she says "from coming faces," because I feel like a lot of times we don't like to picture the future, right? You put a face to it, and you put a name to it, it makes it real. And so I love that she says "the coming faces." And I mean, I don't think it's like just her concept. I think it's like their concept as a whole. But I just love the way it's put, because like saying faces like makes you really picture. Yeah. Like I picture actual people, you know what I mean? Like I'm picturing people.
She's like asking you to do that. I think that's intentional.
Yeah, like I like that, because if you put a face and a name to it, you know, I'd like to think that makes people a little bit more empathetic to the cause.
Yeah.
So
this is slightly off topic, but like just in the practice of doing this book club, and so I guess I feel like I have to like somewhat think Andrew Yang and the Yang Gang, but like this idea of like being futurist and like, but like being a positive futurist, you know, like being hopeful about what it could be. You know, in order to do that, you do have to do that. You have to imagine and like visualize. And I guess like this like new study came out on something about the power of like visualization and metaphysics. I forget. My boss was telling me about it the other day. The act of doing that more often, I think it like does something with your brain, like the way that you think and see the world on a daily basis too. Like, so there's just so much to think about with this quote, but like, it's something that already was there. And, like I've already been kind of actively doing. And then this quote, I think really like contextualized it for me. And like, that's the power of like words and literature, you know, like you have something like this that you can kind of like, it gives clarity. It's like you have all these pieces of a meal and then you put them, you have the like plate to actually put them on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, analogies with Kateri. You should take one of my dance classes. Oh, the analogies. Anyway, hopefully that makes sense. So yeah, definitely this, I think we agree, this for both of us was like definitely one of our favorite quotes.
Yes.
Did we share the page number?
We did not, but it was that whole essay is a really good one. So that one it starts on page 99.
Okay.
And the whole thing is really, really good.
Yes.
And it also made me think of an earlier quote, actually, on page 59, talking about like land ownership.
Yeah.
Which was like something that like settlers, like made up, right? Not think settlers just of like America. I'm saying like around the world, when people started going out and like conquering land and kicking the people that lived there before like out of it. She says it takes a certain kind of arrogance to assume that an entire continent didn't exist before you chose to see it.
I underlined that too.
Yes, I love that one. I think I shared it on our Instagram, because it's like, that is super arrogant to just assume that like, oh, this piece of land like didn't exist until I came to it, and the people that lived here have just been waiting for me.
Mm-hmm.
Waiting for me to conquer them. They've been waiting for me to civilize them. And it's like, who exactly is the uncivilized person here? The people who are living here peacefully and always have been and are taking care of the land, or the people who are kicking everyone out, right?
Yeah.
But I
totally
love that part.
Yeah, I think that's something in like the sort of different Native American literature centered, like especially nonfiction that I've read, is a myth that a lot of people really try to bust, clarify for people, is how that worked out with, this myth that like kind of the colonizers got here and either like, yes, they were savages that needed to be civilized, or even like the land wasn't really being used very well because there wasn't like a lot of people and stuff like that. And so there's been this whole dispute around how many people actually populated these lands. And a big thing that contributed to the myth being started, I think, in the first place, was because there was a fair amount of like people discovering these lands before Columbus, Mm-hmm. And every time those little points of contact happen, rampant disease would spread. Mm-hmm. So later on, when like it became more well known and more people were coming and they really understood what it was, what the land was, what they were coming to do. It wasn't just like, oh, we're exploring and there's some brown people, mm-hmm. Like there was intent there. That's when the literature started to show like, oh, like, yeah, these people, there's not that many of them. They're not utilizing the land properly. It's like, well, they weren't, because so like all their systems, their trade, their farming, like, and their culture, like so much of it just by disease alone had already been semi-wiped out. Mm-hmm. So that's like a myth, I think, that like is worth kind of noting. Yeah. So anyway, if you have thoughts on this, please put a comment in. We'd love to hear from you.
Yes. Also, while I'm thinking about it, because I will forget if I don't say it right now at this moment, if you guys are on TikTok, Indigenous TikTok has taught me so much. Like I keep sending Kateri videos.
I'm like, keep sending them. I love it.
And I thought about this earlier with that comment about the name of that road. And I remember I came across a particular video talking about how the legend and myth surrounding Pocahontas, because that's a stupid Disney movie, and how there's like an actual like acronym, for missing Indigenous women. And she goes into like the whole like story. And it's super impressive because you only have like a finite amount of time,
mm-hmm.
do the TikTok, but she goes into it and just talks about it and how like, you know, white people basically like hijack the story. It's like you can't even have your own stories, like, because we have to take those too.
Yeah.
And it's just like really frustrating. But if you're not on Indigenous TikTok, you have to get on it because you will learn a lot.
And there is, and I'm not on TikTok. There is Indigenous Twitter and Instagram too.
And YouTube.
And YouTube. Yeah, that's great. I have to look on that. I will say, I think Indigenous Twitter is great because you can follow all the organizations. So it's like, you're like, if you're feeling like, yeah, like I want to at least be in the know and help people, you know, you can follow these organizations and just different activists accounts. Follow Alicia Elliot, by the way. She's amazing on Twitter. She's super active. And so you can totally be in the know. And this is shit that's not getting covered by like hardly any media sources, you know? So it's like, I really highly recommend that. And then for me personally, Indigenous Instagram, I guess that's what, I don't know if that's what they call it, but makes sense. Is great for like being plugged into small businesses. There's a good few. Off the top of my head, one is called By Yellowtail, kind of more so for women, but they make like amazing pieces. So anyway, yeah, quick plug, good idea.
I just want to throw that out there because I know if you have attention issues like me, TikTok is actually a really great source for that, and you do learn a lot. I think we all have a responsibility to relearn our history the way it actually happened. And I know that not everybody has time to like sit down and read a history book or sit down and watch, you know, like an hour-long documentary. But if you have like 30 seconds, like you can learn a lot in 30 seconds.
Yeah, great ways to just like make a slight change in your daily routine that can open your world.
Yes, and it's really cool, you know. So yeah, I just wanted to plug that before we move on to the next quote because you know,
thank you.
I would have forgotten.
I would too.
Your absolute favorite.
My favorite. Okay, this is a great one to like move into, and this is like hard to get at, you know, if you're not. It's also really deep, right? So I don't have the study. I need to find the study because I like read about this study a couple years ago at least. I took I was an English major, for those of you who don't know, even though we talk about this like every live stream. But I did get to take, these aren't sociology classes, I got to take some like Native American literature classes. Amazing classes, right? In one of them, I found out about this study that was done where they did find out that intergenerational trauma does actually affect your DNA. So it's not just like, I think for me, like I think of breaking the cycle. There are like multiple people in my life, not all of them even family, that I know where you kind of think of like, how do you break the cycle? Like imagine if you, also I think this idea around like adoption, like if you were to take, or if like a Native woman were to give up her child or, you know, were to have it taken away, which is a whole other topic. And then that child were be placed in like a middle class, like white family in a really peaceful suburb, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean like early at birth, like that the study shows that like that child is still going to be affected by their intergenerational trauma, despite the fact that they've had this, it's that whole like nature versus nurture.
It's called epigenetics. I learned about it in one of my classes.
Tell us about epigenetics.
Well, I mean, basically that's what it is. It's like how stressors can really alter DNA. On like a smaller scale, there was a study done on, I think it was mice, and they exposed them to the smell of cherry blossoms. And whenever they smelled it, they introduced a pain response. And so after a while of conditioning, they would smell it and immediately like be fearful. And they could see the same fear response up to 3 generations after. So that same fear response, even though like the second and third generations like never had the experiment done to them, if they smelled cherry blossoms, it triggered like a fear response.
Yeah, there you go. And
epigenetics.
Epigenetics. It has a name, guys. It totally just gets at Thank you, Meghin.
I can't see it.
Oh, you can't see it. Kaiva Lyon says, epigenetics, in quotes. I was today years old when I first heard that word.
It's really interesting. Like it's a really interesting, she goes into it a little bit in the essay, but it's a really interesting thing to look into because it is that whole thing like nature versus nurture, and some of it really is just nature. Yeah. But it is also nurture, in that like your environment can affect not just you, but affects your, generations to come.
Yeah, well, and that perfectly gets at our, like, this is the perfect segue quote. I mean, not segue quote, but, it gets back at the last one where it's like, we need to really take existence seriously, like, and the way that we affect people around us. And of course, like, that goes for our children. So anyway, that's that. What this quote does, though, is it takes that thing and I can't even like put into words like the meaning of it to me, but obviously it just like gives it this positive light, This is something that when I learned this, I mean, without getting too personal, like I have the native side of my family and I have the non-native side of my family, and there's some differences. Like I just can't like objectively like can't deny that there's some differences as far as the like emotional, mental, physical health kind of overall of the native side of my family to the basically entirely white side of my family. So when I learned that about epigenetics, that's right. Yeah. Like that it was both enlightening, but it didn't feel good to learn that. It was like helpful to learn that because I was like, okay, this is knowledge I can put to use, and there's something good about that. But it also felt like, I don't know, it's just interesting how like science can like meld with like your mental health. It was a hard pill to swallow. Let's just put it that way. So this changed my life right here. Like this quote, I'm not even kidding. And it should change everyone's life because doesn't matter if you aren't connected to, I think you should think this way. If you're not connected to Indigenous peoples biologically or in any sort of way that is personal to you, we're all a part of what this is. Like we are all a part of this story. You can be a part of the answer, it's not hard. And so I think that like, that's a big part of this book overall. But this quote to me, like, we can all love each other, like we can all do what needs to be done to love each other, to make sure that our systems create loving environments for everybody, So this just says it all to me. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, and it kind of goes into, this is something that I say all the time, is that I hate this attitude of I had it hard, so you have to. And it's like, this really, I think, gets at like stopping that cycle too. Like instead of saying, I had it really hard, so I'm going to make sure you have it really hard because it's not fair that you have it easier than me. When it's like, no, you should be thinking like, no, like I had it hard, so I want you to have it easier than I did. Like I want life to be easier for you. I don't want you to have to struggle for everything, because those stressors do build up. Like just as human beings, like stressors build up, and like I understand, like I guess wanting like justice or restitution or something for your struggles. Like I get that, but that justice shouldn't be making someone else pay for it when it wasn't their fault in the first place, And yeah, to me, that's what this made me think of as well, is that like we have to stop that cycle and make it easier for the next generations, because if we make it easier to love everyone, then it will be easier for them to love everyone, which makes it easier for those generations after them to love people. You know, and then you just kind of have a society of people finally that learn how to love and trust each other instead of immediately distrust. And I'm not going to say each other, but I feel like there's just this immediate dislike for your fellow man nowadays. That's like, why? Like, why do you immediately dislike somebody, and why do you immediately distrust them?
Right.
You know, and I think that's what this quote really made me think of, because I'm really sick of it. Like, I'm just so tired of it. And you see it in so different systems. You see it in everyday life. You know, I had it hard, so you have to as well. And it's like, no.
There's also the ways that we inadvertently or unintentionally do that. You know, it's not always like you're consciously saying I had it hard, so you have to have it hard. Like sometimes I think, especially like with parents, like parents to child, like, you know, like generally like parents don't consciously think that way, but I think that there can be this sense of, I mean, there definitely can be, because like I know other people who've experienced it. You don't have to just be someone of indigenous descent to experience it, you know. I think we can have this cycle keep going because of unintentionally thinking that way and intentionally thinking that way. One thing I just thought of another book. It's called The Women of Brewster Place. I think I recommended it in a bygone era on Takeover Tuesday, by Gloria Naylor. And that is fiction. And one of the moments in that book, the book is mostly about women, but there's a character who's a man, and this is kind of taking place in the past. I think it's one of the main characters' father. And it talks about how he learned how to treat women based on his this is past slavery, but like he's a what's it called? Crop sharer or something like that. You know, there was like the way that systems of slavery were continued was how they parsed out land to Black people, and you know, so he basically there was a lot of he was I don't know, it's like indentured servitude or something like that. Anyway, so she shows through fiction, through storytelling, how he learns now that he you know, has this freedom, like he's learning the colonizer, like the white man's notions of masculinity. And so it's like that was a moment where it kind of goes to show like all this colonizer stuff is pretty deep rooted. And so, anything is up for grabs as far as what we can think more critically about. And so I think that kind of gets at like the hopefulness that is in this quote about how, like, you know, the possibilities are endless as far as how we can rethink things and learn to love each other and trust each other and treat each other better. So, yeah.
Agreed.
Great. Cool. All right, guys. Again, if you have any thoughts, please put them in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Don't have to have read the book. Yeah.
This next one kind of like, it just goes more into depth about what we were talking about before. She's kind of asking, she asked like, how do we stop it then? And it's kind of interesting because I was literally, my first thought was like, it makes me think of like this whole like student loan thing, right? How some people are like, no, you can't forgive student loan debt. Why would you do that? I had to pay mine off. You know what I mean? And it's like, while I do kind of understand that, at the same time, I'm like, but there are people that literally have like crippling debt. Like,
they'll never pay off.
Right. And you want them to continue suffering because you had to suffer. And it's like, but it's a very capitalistic mindset, right? Yeah. And we mentioned this before. It's like money means nothing. Like, what is money? Like, what is this whole concept? Like, the whole concept of money is just like why?
I know. I love how like deeply we've been radicalized by a book club.
It's just like, why? Like, money is like the same material. Like it's paper. It's paper.
Yeah.
Like but somehow we give it value. And with that value comes people who then have no value if you don't have enough of the paper.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you also have too much of the paper, you also have no value.
Well, it's also like, it's not even paper, because it's like, I don't have cash. Do you have cash?
No, I have credit. I have plastic.
I literally have no cash on me.
Yeah, if you have too much of the plastic or not enough of the plastic, you have zero value. And then if you have just the right amount, you could be, you know, I don't know. It's so dumb. And so it's interesting because this is also what Eric Holthaus gets into in his book, The Future Earth, which I think is the one that we referenced back to the most with everything that we read.
Yeah, interesting, right?
Yeah, but he also kind of says that like capitalism, I'm not going to say I'm not a capitalist. To be honest with you, I haven't really like researched enough like where I stand on this. So I'm not saying I'm an expert, but it's just so interesting that every time someone's trying to say like, okay, what's the answer to something like this? The answer is never capitalism, because capitalism makes it worse. At least the version of capitalism that we currently have, right, is like not the answer, because it's just making it worse and worse and worse.
Yeah, I mean, it's like this, I'm getting so tired of people saying like, you know, like when you're trying to make the argument of maybe a universal basic income, of like why we need to help people who don't have money. And then the response to that is, but you know, well, we have capitalism. Like they could just go get a job. Like they could go figure something out and make some money. And like, you know, it's like, it's just free for the taking. All this money is just free for the taking. I just want to like sometimes grab people by the shoulders and be like, if it were so easy,
everyone,
why are there so many people who haven't done that?
Yes, I was talking to someone on Twitter today, and it was like, you know, some people are like, oh, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, but like you're assuming everybody has boots and everyone has feet.
All right.
Not everyone has feet and not everyone has boots. So what are they supposed to do? Like they can't.
And this sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, like, they can't do it. Like they can't. Like it's impossible. And you're asking them to do the impossible. And then you're comparing it to you who had all of these opportunities that they didn't have. I don't know. It's just, it's really frustrating to me. And I could probably keep talking about it, but this is one of recognized by a book club. Mission accomplished.
We did it. Hope we radicalized you guys too. This book, for you know, like Megan and I are obviously very passionate about this. You know, this is something like you want to know more about. You can read this book, because this book goes into specifics about why what we're talking about is true. Can you see this?
See what?
Oh, okay, Kai Valiant again. Bootstraps need boots. Hugh Segal. Huh. Segal sounds familiar. I just don't know if that's the same Segal.
Probably not.
Bootstraps need boots. I love that. Actually, for all the talk we do about bootstraps in the Yang Gang, I haven't heard someone actually quote that.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that. And boots need feet. Like,
yeah, some people don't have boots. Some people don't have feet.
You know, the metaphor it doesn't pan out. It doesn't play. Yeah, I feel like we could keep talking about this, but honestly, if you guys really want to learn more about why our system doesn't work, we have like, I don't know how long have we been doing this? Like every single live stream, we go into this. Tyranny of Kindness goes into it in detail. We have that with Scott Santens and Teresa Finigiello. The Future Earth, we go into it. Obviously, Andrew Yang's book, we go into it. You know, so it's like
Made.
Yes, Made obviously goes into it. So
even Dread Nation goes into it.
Yes, Dread Nation does go into it, a fiction book as well. You know, so if you guys want to learn more about it, want to hear more about it, I don't think we should go into it like too much more. But look back on some of our other live streams and some of our other interviews, because we do go into it quite a bit. And also follow Scott Santens. Like he also has just like a ton of information.
Yeah. Bootstraps Need Boots by Hugh Segal is a book. It's not just a quote.
Oh, boots. Oh, nice.
Yeah. So kind of
We're planning out next year. That's a good suggestion. I like that. We already went into this quote, and I forgot that we had it in here, but
yeah, it's a good reminder. Yeah, so we talked about land ownership. So yeah, if you have any thoughts on that, still feel free to chime in.
I messed this one up. I made the font too big.
Can kind of read it. Oh wait, I think
our parents are far from perfect, but their main barriers to being better parents were poverty, intergenerational trauma, and mental illness. Things neither social workers nor police officers have ever been equipped to address, yet both are allowed, even encouraged, to patrol. I think this is one of my favorites and one of the ones that stuck out to me the most. I think I actually probably have the page number.
I have it.
Yeah, go for it.
94 to 95.
Yes. It stuck out to me so much because, I mean, I feel like I don't even have to explain it that much. You know, I feel like we've seen again and again and again what happens when, you know, police officers get involved. But the truth is, like, social workers aren't really equipped for that either. And they know they're not. I feel like a lot of social workers that I've talked to, like, they quit their job pretty fast. They don't last long. They're not equipped to handle this. And to be honest, we don't have a system in place that is equipped to handle poverty and mental illness. Like, we're really not. And we live in a society that's kind of criminalized poverty and criminalized mental illness. I looked up to this morning because I was curious, like, of the American homeless population, like, how many have a mental illness? I think it was 25% have a severe mental illness, and then 45% have at least anxiety and depression. And that's just the people that they get to talk to them. You know what I mean? And so it's probably even bigger than that. And they're living in poverty too, you know? So it's like, and we just don't have anything really in place to help that, you know? And, you know, with her, she was going into even more personally about how, like, there were things that really needed to be addressed in her own house, in her own household. They needed help, but they were terrified to reach out because they knew they'd be taken away from their parents and split up. And it's like, and because that's the only answer they could give. And if they got the police involved, well, like, they were living on the reservation. You know what I mean? So it's like they didn't want to bring the police on there either because they didn't really care.
Yeah. I have this whole, sorry, one second. Okay. I see you, Erin Beccaresis. I will put those book recommendations up in just a minute. Thank you. But on this little slightly more serious note, so I have 2 siblings who are adopted, and I've had a long kind of journey with thinking about these systems. And so in a nutshell, you know, I've been asked, like, oh, like, I'm the only biological child of my parents. I'm older. I have 2 younger adopted siblings. I've been asked on multiple occasions, like, oh, are you going to adopt? Are you going to, you know, like, do you want to do this? Like, and that question has always has never sat well with me. And I, for the longest time, could not figure it out. And it literally was like, kind of like the Yang Gang. And then subsequently this book club and, like, learning about our systems, because before all this, I didn't understand our systems to the level that I do now. Not that I'm an expert, but it's like, it doesn't take very much. You just have to read a few books and, like, you have a sounding board. So anyway, and so I have this thing where it's not that I don't believe in adoption, but adoption has been so normalized in our society, where and I've known some women who have had their children taken away from them, and I've, like, agreed that they're not fit to be mothers. Yet when you can kind of objectively, like, see how that's true, and, like, you can agree with that. But if you've seen it firsthand, if you've gone through that experience with someone, I don't see how you can't still not believe that we should not be separating women from their kids, right? So obviously what I'm you know, like, in order for this to be a thing, we need to radically change our society. Like, it obviously can't work. It is the way it is for a reason. Like, I'm not trying to be like crazy idealist here or something, like, you know, but yeah, in a nutshell, like, I've just kind of come to this thing, like, we should be measuring our society by how many are the health of our society. And like, this is something that Andrew Yang would talk about a lot, you know, like with the American scorecard, and he had so many things on that list that I completely agree with. I think something we should put on there is how many children are being taken away from their mothers and their fathers, but, you know, away from their biological children. And so this is like kind of getting at this thing more so to do with the social workers, but it's just like, that's one thing that I've kind of recently discovered. Obviously, adoption is always going to be a thing. You're going to have people who, you know, like parents who die in car accidents, and, you know, like terrible things like that. So it's never going to go away. But I think adoption is just like incredibly normalized in our society, you know. And then I can also speak, you know, speaking to the police officers thing on a slightly personal level. Like, I work in mental health. When I work with people who have like depression and schizophrenia and bipolar disorder diagnoses, and if they decompensate, who do we call? We call the police. Like, I live in a pretty affluent city, you know, and imagine, I've never been suicidal in my life, but imagine being on the brink of something crazy like that, and who shows up? A police officer. And what maybe happens? You get put in handcuffs.
Yep. You're further traumatized.
Yeah.
You're just like, traumatized. I've been there. Like, I haven't been suicidal, like, actively, but when I was getting real deep here, when I was in college, my senior year, my very last semester, I have adjustment disorder. And so, like, when I have really big changes happening, like, it messes with my sleep. I get really bad anxiety. I get really depressed. But this was the first time I'd ever experienced that, because up until then, I just had like a regular routine, right? Like, you go from school to high school to like college, and I was about to graduate and move away and get married, and it was a lot happening. And I was trying to get on medication, but in Florida, and I didn't know this at the time, but in Florida, you can only get medication from a psychiatrist or a nurse practitioner who has done like a psychiatric fellowship. And I didn't know this. So I went to an ER because I was like, I need medication now. Like, I haven't slept. I'm having like, it wasn't like a panic attack that lasted like a few hours. It was like panic attacks that were lasting for days at a time. And I wasn't sleeping. And so I was getting manic. And I was like, that's not great for like being in school. And so I went to the emergency room, and like, thankfully at the time I wasn't suicidal, so they didn't admit me, but they did put me in like the emergency room psych place. And I remember going in there, and everyone else that was in there was like coming down from a high, super drunk, like on like carts, basically, like against the wall. And then they put me in this room that has like no windows, doesn't even have a door. I didn't even get the privacy of a door. It was just like a curtain. They took away all my clothes. They took away my phone. They took away all my belongings. I couldn't have anyone in there with me because I was 21. I was over 18, so I couldn't have anyone in there with me. And then the security guard looks at me and he's like, "So what did you do?" And I was like, "What? Like, what do you mean, what did I do? Like, I just have anxiety and I'm depressed and I haven't slept. And you're asking me what I did to be put here? Like, I don't." And I just remember thinking, like, this is awful. And I couldn't even imagine if I had gotten admitted, like, how I would have been treated. And like, it's terrified me ever since. And like, I'm like pretty scared of doctors now. Like, I'm afraid to admit sometimes when I'm struggling because of that, because it's like, they're just taught to like, they're not even like de-escalating the situation. They're just further traumatizing you. And it's terrible, honestly.
Yeah. It's terrible that people who need help get to a point where they don't want it, you know? They're just gonna, I'd rather not seek help because it's not gonna help. It might make the situation worse.
Yeah. And like, I'm fully also acknowledging that like I'm a white female. And so like I was probably treated better than other people. And so like, I'm fully acknowledging that. So I can't even speak to like anyone else's experiences. That's obviously way worse for them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I would say something that, you know, with mental health, there's this like terrible idea of like, you're making it up. You're taking, you know, like it's all in your head. You just need to get a grip or something, you know? And so, you know, there's studies that show about how, you know, like specifically for Black women, how doctors don't take women's pain seriously. They take like Black women's pain even less seriously, and it can lead to death. I mean, there could be something wrong. And if the doctor, I mean, I think a lot of us have been in a finite similar situation where you like, I've got something weird going on, and your doctor's like, oh, it's nothing. And you're like, I don't know. Like, it kind of seems like something's happening. It's my body. I know. Like, probably a lot of us could relate to that. Well, imagine it being something that's actually life or death, and imagine it, I guess, having to do with, your skin color, something as simple as that. So yeah, definitely good to mention. So I'm going to put this back up here. Where'd it go? Again, thank you, Kaiba Lion, for checking in. Being the son in a family of immigrants, this quote hits close to home. Thank you. Well, thank you for being here and for sharing that. We really appreciate it. And we hope you will maybe check out this book. Thank you. So I have some people putting in some Christmas reads recommendations. I feel like we're a little too deep into this darkness here. So let's see what else we have left, and we'll save those for the end. I just want to make sure you know I'm not ignoring you.
This one's a happy one. I love this one.
Yes, this is it. Like, maybe we should end on this one because we're already over an hour.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do we have?
We have like 2 left after this. Let me see real fast. This is the longer version of it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, then this is it.
Yep, it's the longer version of it. Yeah.
Let's put this one up. Do you want to read it?
Sure. Perhaps one day this neighborhood, this city, this country will finally hear its neglected past whispering, "Look at me plainly. Look at me. Look at your patterns. Don't make the same mistakes. Don't hide who you were. Acknowledge it, then make something new, something beautiful, something that will make everyone proud." I love this one, and I keep coming back to it because, I say this all the time, is that like, if you can't move past something unless you acknowledge that it happened, and that you can't just ignore it and then try to move on. Like, you have to acknowledge this is something that happened, and it doesn't have to define me. Like, I don't have to redefine my past in order to have a good future. Like, I can keep my past the way it is and acknowledge that that's what happened, and then move forward with the mindset of like, but I don't have to make those mistakes again. Like, I can keep going forward, and like, I can make my life into something great, and I can make everyone proud. And I think we can definitely go into that personally, but I think as a country, like, and obviously you're speaking from like the American experience because that's what we know. But it's like, she's also talking from the Canadian experience, which I will say super fast. If you don't know much about like Canadian history, like, she goes into it and it's not pretty. Like, I know some of us now, because our country isn't so great at the moment, we're like, oh, Canada is like this like beacon of like, oh, we want to go there. And they have an ugly past too, like really ugly, and it's still bleeding into their current time.
And she also talks about that a bit in the interview too.
Yes, she does go into that a lot. So super great for that. But as a country, I think it would help us to move forward in a better way if we just acknowledge that, like, We were not built on a good foundation. We weren't. What we did, the things that we did in the past were not good things. And you don't have to rewrite that past, and you don't have to ignore it, because the more you do that, the more you are re-traumatizing the generations that are here now. You're re-traumatizing them because they can't move past it either. You're not allowing them to move past it. And if we don't acknowledge what this country was built on and what we did to several different sets of people, then like we can never really truly move forward and make something new or make something beautiful, or something that we're proud of. And like, I know it's kind of sad, but the happy part is that like we have a generation, I feel like, with millennials and with Gen Z. I know Gen Z gets like a bad rep, but they're trying. Millennials, we're a little depressed, but we're trying. We are trying, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We are trying to inform people about, you know, our history, and we are trying to make a better future, and we're trying to make something that we're proud of, and something that, you know, 7 generations from now will be proud of. And we're fighting tooth and nail and like screaming and fighting for it, you know, to the blood, but like we are fighting for it. And I think that, like what you were saying earlier, like it's that hopeful view of the future that is really hard to grasp, but I don't think we should give up grasping for it.
Yeah, I love that you mention kind of the flip side to this, the dark side of the trauma that gets, and talking about cycles earlier, the trauma that gets re-traumatized, the people that get re-traumatized by the stories we tell, the stories we don't tell, you know, the way that we edit history is a form of trauma for these people. You know, yeah, Pocahontas.
Yeah,
we were just talking about that. And so, I think that's really, really great that you bring that up. And this quote made me cry. Like, I don't cry easily in books. I really don't. I cry super easily at like commercials. Like, put a sappy song and like something with a dog or something, you know. But for some reason, when I read, I don't cry very easily. And during books. So anyway, this made me cry. Cause I think it's that thing that is just, it's just hope. Like, that's what marries hope and courage to me. Like, because I think we talk about hope in a kind of vanilla way a lot of the time, if that makes sense. And we have to realize that really, like, hope involves reconciling our past and facing our darknesses, and mending the wounds and stuff like that. But what's kind of beautiful about that is that once you've done that, like, you get to be a part of something amazing and beautiful. And we all get to be a part of that. It doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter what you've been doing up until this point in your life, what your ancestors' role was in this, doesn't matter. You know, you can be a part of this thing that will make everyone proud. I love that. Like, I think the fact that she used the word proud, like it implies a sense of ownership. And so it kind of brings the whole book full circle in a way. Cause like she starts out talking about, the idea of like what ownership is and like owning the land. There's also a really interesting chapter that, like, I guess we won't really get into, but there's a whole chapter on photography, and like the like colonist perspective. We did share one quote on that, of photography and like Native people's early interaction with that. So anyway, this whole idea of ownership, you know, so this is the thing we get to own. Like, we get to own our actions. We get to own what we create, you know, not the things we take. Like, that's not going to work. Cause it's like, you have, you know, like the Native American perspective where it's like, you don't own the land. I mean, you know, like, yes, I'll acknowledge like actual history, like they did war with each other, but I don't think there's necessarily a lot of science to prove that it was based on like land ownership. So yeah, so you have this new perspective on ownership, and it's definitely gonna require us to rethink some things to do with our society and our economy and the way we have things set up. But it's gonna be awesome, right?
Yeah.
That's the idea. We're gonna make it awesome because we've reconciled, we've learned our past, and we've learned how to reconcile it.
Yes, exactly. Oh,
Cool. Oh, hello, she's back. So you couldn't see me?
I can
Wow.
see you. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I love that quote, and I think it's a really good one to end on because I think it's ending it on hope. And I think that's what we try to do whenever because we honestly cover a lot of really heavy topics in this book club. We really do. Oh, yay! That's awesome. If you do buy it, please go through our bookshop link. It supports the book club, but it also supports an indie bookstore. For this year, we've been doing Pegasus bookstore in Seattle. And we might switch it, but that's just been who we've been doing. But yeah, that would be super helpful. Everything that we make like a very
the link is below. So we have an affiliate link. This is the only way that we get financial support for the book club. Most of that goes back into the various ways that we run the channel and the platforms, and also book giveaways. So there are a couple of you, if you're here, that got a free book this month. So we do those every month on our Twitter and on our Instagram. So anyway, yes, yeah, go ahead and click that link. It's in the description box. Thank you, Kaiva Lion. You are awesome.
Yes, so glad you guys liked it. It's honestly a very good book, and it's an easy read. Like it's pretty short. It's not a long book. It's really not.
A book in comparison to my face.
But it's not a long book. But it's really good. It's very beautiful. Again, if you guys didn't see the interview with Alicia, go check that out. She goes into a lot more in depth. It's mostly her talking, which is like awesome, because she goes into a lot of depth that we couldn't possibly cover. So yeah, I hope that kind of left you guys on like a note of hope that I'm not going to say it's going to be okay, but you at least have two people here that are not giving up.
Yeah, we're not giving up. Hell no. Thank you, Stephanie.
Sure.
Wait, was Stephanie were you one of our giveaway winners?
You won the one before.
Yeah, you won the first one.
Red Nation? Is that what it was?
No, I think it was which side of history.
Yes, it might have been that one.
So that was our first one. Anyway,
that says I was radicalized by a book club.
Oh my gosh! Yes, we're working on merch, guys. That'll be.
All I got was this T-shirt or something stupid like that.
I love it.
We haven't brought this up before, and there's like not very many of you on here right now at this moment. But I don't know. You might be watching this later. If we did merch, like, would you guys be interested in that? Because we're going into things, going into the new year. We're trying to, I don't want to say up our game because this isn't a game to us. We're trying to make it better for you guys, a better experience for you guys. And we do think about merch sometimes, but obviously with merch, there would have to be an interest. So
yeah,
know what you want.
yeah. Or just if you have feedback on anything, we are gonna start working on like even making these book club reports even better. So if you have ideas, if you have ideas, you can reach out to us on Twitter or Instagram. We also have an email. I actually don't know if that's in the description box.
I don't know.
ygbookclub@gmail.com. Put in the chat.
Thank you.
So yeah, so if you are, let us know if you're thinking about picking this up after all anyway. I was going to add to what Megan was saying, it's easy to read. It's like easy to like, just think of it read an essay before you go to bed every night for like less than a month, you know, like that's the kind of book that this is. Cause it's not like, I mean, you could also read it in one sitting. If you're that kind of person, I just like never can read books in one sitting. It's like impossible for me. I don't know why. Anyway, but that's the kind of book that this is. And it's one of those ones, it's now on my list of like books I think everyone should read. Do you have one of those lists?
Yes.
Of like, this is a book I would basically put, wouldn't put it in the hands of a child, but like the general adult world, everyone should read this book.
Yeah. You know my top two. You know my top. This is an Uprising and Crisis 2038.
Yes.
Maybe a few future too, but that's already in some curriculums already.
Yeah.
It's like big deal. Big deal. I will say,
I agree. Essays are great.
Yes, I will say the essays do get longer towards the end of the book. So you might read them all in one sitting at night if you get tired. But towards the beginning, like, super easy to read one before bed. Towards the end, like you might get like halfway through one.
Yeah, I would agree.
Super good. Two, let me throw this up here. Make our bookcase for humanity.
Bookcase for humanity time. Okay. So I feel it's always one of those things where like I feel like we said so much. How do you put it into like something simple?
I think, to be honest, that last quote we shared. And I think the biggest underlying theme in this book is acknowledge your past, acknowledge that it happened, whether that be personal or as a country, as a city, as a neighborhood, as a family unit. Acknowledge that the past happened and move forward and do something that makes you and everyone around you proud.
Yeah. I think also just kind of like that, but like getting into some other things that she talks about in the book, like, you know, like we all like kind of hurt each other at times, you know, like she really gets into like abuse in the book as well. And so I think this is, as far as like what I think this kind of speaks to humanity at large, is also just talking about how kind of like the idea of also the intergenerational love quote, I think is another one where like we can all learn to love each other despite all the fucked up shit that we do to each other. I think that's kind of what I'm thinking of. Yeah.
It's kind of, we're all a family, honestly.
Yeah.
And families do some fucked up shit to each other. They do.
Yeah. Which also, if we're all a family, that also gets up the like 7 generations.
Yes. But that doesn't mean we ever stop loving each other. And I think that we have to remember that.
Definitely. Yeah.
So
great.
I think that's great. Oh, my light just went away. Back on focus. This is great. Yeah. So I think we're coming up at an hour and a half, which is when my attention starts.
We know. Megan tips out.
It's like at the time, every single time.
Yeah. Rob's like, how long is it going to take? I'm like, about an hour and a half.
Every time. But yeah, I think this was good. I think we did a great job.
Yeah.
And you
great
guys
talk, guys.
Yes, you guys did a good job. Chiming in. We really appreciate it.
I did promise I would put these up. Christmas is coming up, guys. Has anyone ever read a Christmas book?
Can you hear me?
Christmas books are actually really fun. Okay. So we've got a few of you in here putting in Christmas books, which I thought was really cool.
I saw the Chesapeake, and I'm like, is that taking place in Maryland or Virginia?
The Chesapeake Shores Christmas. So are these all? I was like wondering if these were all. So we have like James Patterson was the earlier one. Christmas books are fun. Christmas books are, and if you know a reader in your life, get them a Christmas book. I mean, obviously, if they don't like Christmas, then that might be problematic. But who doesn't like Christmas? Anyway, thank you for that. We are all about the book recommendations on here. You know that. And thanks, Stephanie, for being here. As always, you're awesome. Thanks, Kaiba Lion. Shout out to you. Let's see, Leona Lumbre. You're still here. Thank you for checking in. Thank you all for reading with us this month. Our next book is I don't know why that sounds.
Humankind.
I love this cover.
Me too. I'm like excited to look at what we're gonna do for our themes.
Yeah, I know. We're gonna have some fun with this one too.
Hopeful history.
This feels like Scandi Christmas kind of vibes. We can do some Scandi Christmas kind of vibes. Yeah, Rutger totally retweeted our announcement for this, and Andrew Yang, but yeah, he's a homie.
Yes. Start now.
Yeah. Well, have you started it yet?
I haven't, but I also have the audiobook, so that helps me faster.
Because this is maybe the longest book we've read. I will just say, I've started it. It's riveting, okay? Like, it's not a slow read. It is big, but it's not a slow read. It is not one of those, like, because it says a hopeful history of humankind. It's not one of those, like, it's a history book. It's not really told linear. It's not like, I'm going to give you the history of humanity and just, like, with my own spin. It's, I mean, like, the whole history from start to finish. I mean, it's kind of similar to this in a way, where it's like a bunch of kind of essays that all make a whole, and the essays are riveting. And I will just say, I don't know if you can tell, the font isn't teeny tiny.
It's not, yeah.
This book is like as big as my head, and some of you can maybe read that font, which is saying something. So yeah, definitely recommend. This is not one of our cheaper books. Sorry guys, but that is what happens when we pick a new release. But we had to pick this because it's just one of the most recommended books. Yeah. Giselle Huff from Fund for Humanity, who we've also had on the channel, she like specifically reached out to us and was like, I think you should read this. Andrew Yang there is a whole, we don't need to have, well, it'd be great to have Rutger on, but he was on Yang Speaks. If you didn't know, if you didn't catch that, check out that episode of the Yang Speaks podcast, because this was actually, do you remember Andrew Yang got this book sent to him, he like tagged us in the picture. That was awesome. So it was kind of like,
okay, well, I guess we have to read this now.
Yeah, we have to read this now.
I was gonna say check Libby, the Libby app. Check your library first. See if maybe they have like the audiobook or an ebook version available. And then check out our giveaways. We have one on Twitter that is already going, and then I will be putting up our Instagram giveaway probably Monday. So go there, comment. All you have to do is comment, like it, and follow us, and tag somebody in the comments. That's all you have to do, and you'll be entered, and you might win. So
yeah. So we're giving away the book, or 2 books. There's technically 2 giveaways, one on Twitter, one on Instagram, every month. So the one on Twitter ends tonight. Yes, tonight. And then we're going to hopefully launch Monday. We'll launch it Monday. You said it, so it's happening. Cool. Hardcover Bobby. That's amazing. I actually am more of a paperback person than myself, but I used to be more of a hardcover person, so I feel you.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, I think that about does it. Thank you guys.
Yes, wait. One more thing.
Go for it.
I don't even know if he's announced this yet. Guys, we're going to be on Nerds for Humanity tomorrow.
Yes.
That's so exciting. Like, I don't know about you, but like when back in actual Yang 2020 era, pre-book club era, I was totally following Nerds for Yang at the time. And so this is going to be really fun. And guess who it's going to be with, guys? I have the book right here.
Some people you've seen before. We're
going to be on with the Union Boys, as we like to call them. They're grown-ass men. But these amazing writers, Jordan Blaszek, I guess we're saying his last name wrong, I forget. And Chris Hall. who are super awesome. We have an interview with them that really goes into depth on the book. We're going to be talking, I think, more like current events and also like where do we go from here now that this is actually going to be a post-Trump era, you know, stuff like that. So, so yeah, check us out. If you're not already on Nerds for Humanity, we will be on there at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time tomorrow. Boom.
Yes. I was like, what time is that? Eastern. Like, we
just hit an hour and 30 minutes. So here we go.
All right. So make sure you check that out. Follow us on Twitter at YG Book Club. Follow us on Instagram at Yanking Book Club. Email us if you have any suggestions, ygbookclub@gmail.com. And I think that's everything. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. We need to come up with a sign-off. Give us sign-off ideas.
Yeah, give us sign-off ideas. We're taking those too.
Yes. So yeah, we'll see you guys next time. Have a good weekend.
Happy reading.
Yes, happy reading.